and welcome back to Phillies Extra, the baseball show from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm Scott Lauber, and I write about the Phillies and Major League Baseball. And no matter where you're finding us, Apple, Spotify, Inquirer.com, the Inquirer's YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, or wherever else you get your sports news, thank you as always for spending part of your week with us. Don't look now, but we've got a pretty good World Series going on. Maybe you stayed up until 3 a.m. the other day to see the Dodgers outlast the Blue Jays in Game 3 when Freddie Freeman homered to end an epic 18-inning marathon that was as riveting as any game you'll ever see. Well, the Blue Jays punched right back in Game 4 to even the series. Someone is going to be one win away from a championship when this episode drops, but this much we know. The World Series will be decided north of the border in Toronto for the first time since 1993. Now, once the World Series ends, the offseason will begin, with dozens of players filing for free agency. Around here, we'll be paying special attention to Kyle Schwarber, JT Realmuto, and Ranger Suarez, the Phillies' big three free agents. And my guest this week knows them all very well because he's coached them all for the last several seasons. I'm excited to sit down with Dusty Wathan, who has multiple responsibilities on Rob Thompson's coaching staff. He's the Phillies' third base coach, an important and prominent role, but he's also the catching coach. And that's one of the main reasons I wanted to invite him in this week, because the Phillies are facing a difficult decision on Realmuto, their star catcher. On one hand, he's going to play at age 35 next season and is in a 4-year decline as a hitter, going from an 820 OPS in 2022 to 762 in 2023, 751 in 2024, and 700 this season. On the other hand, Realmuto's work behind the plate probably outweighs, or at the very least counterbalances, his regression at the plate. He's coming off a season in which he started a career-high 132 games. He's almost an extension of pitching coach Caleb Cotham in terms of working with the pitchers. And those pitchers, well, you heard all you needed to know about how important Realmuto is to what they do in September, after he took a foul ball off the hand and had to leave a game against the Marlins. Talking about Realmuto after the game, Christopher Sanchez said, quote, "We're basically nothing without him." Now, Realmuto is ineligible for the $22.025 million qualifying offer because he received a qualifying offer from the Phillies the last time he was a free agent back in the 2020-2021 offseason. He's probably going to want a multi-year deal anyway, either 2 or 3 years. The best comp for Realmuto might be Yadier Molina, who in 2017 signed a 3-year, $60 million deal with the Cardinals that covered his age 35 to 37 seasons. But that was an extension, not free agency, so it's not exactly apples to apples. At any rate, Dusty Wathan has worked with Realmuto every day since 2019, so there isn't anybody better to provide perspective on how Realmuto has somehow been able to maintain such a hefty workload behind the plate, what he means to everything the Phillies have been about over the last 7 years, and how difficult it is to imagine the team moving forward without him. We'll touch on plenty of other things as well, including the implementation of the automatic ball strike system next season and how it might affect the job that catchers have to do behind the plate. If you stick with me after our conversation, I'll bring in my teammate, Inquirer columnist David Murphy, to discuss the recent soap opera, which is really what it was, involving Bryce Harper and the beginning of the Phillies offseason. And of course, I'll take a listener question at the end. But first things first, let's get right to it. Here's my sit down with Phillies third base and catching coach, Dusty Wathan. Dusty Wathan, welcome to Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
There are so many great reasons to have you as a guest on the show. I ran down your bio in the introduction, and you're kind of the epitome of a baseball lifer, right? Like, you've seen so many things, done so many things. And if you haven't done them or seen them yourself, your dad probably has. So I'll start with kind of a broad question for you, and you can take it in whatever direction you want. It's been about 3 weeks now since the Phillies got knocked out of the playoffs. I wonder how long it takes for you to kind of process the season coming to an end, because it kind of, like as Rob Thompson said, it kind of, when it ends with kind of like a thud. It ended with a real big thud this year. And, I kind of wonder how long it takes you to kind of process what happened and kind of move on from it And part two, does it come as any consolation this time around that, look, the Dodgers ran right over the Brewers. They're in the World Series. As we sit here, they're a couple of wins away from maybe being the first team to repeat in 25 years. Does it come as any consolation at all to you that, that was the team that knocked you guys out?
I don't think it's a consolation. I think it's one of those situations where no matter who you get knocked off by, you're going to be disappointed. And it takes a few days at least. Most of the time I hang around Philly for a couple days before I head home to my family. Excuse me. I've always told my family, and my wife's been really good at this since way back when I was playing in the minor leagues, that I leave the game at the ballpark. And sometimes at the end of the year, it's hard. So I usually take a day or two, and she says, take your time before you come home. Because I want to be present at home when I get home. So yeah, it's a couple days, but excuse me, I got a little bug here. But going back to the end of the season, I think when you get knocked out, it's always shocking. You're always expecting to win the next game. You're never expecting to go home. And I think this year is no different. We expected to win. Obviously, Dodgers are a very good club, but I think we're right there with them. They say it's a game of inches, and a ball here, a ball there, a pitch here, a pitch there. And, we might be still playing tonight. So it's a really hard sport. The regular season is something very special. And to put up the wins that we have the last 4 or 5 years is something. But obviously it comes down to the end, and you got to win the tournament. You get into the tournament at the end. You got to win a couple short series. You got to get lucky here or there. And, we haven't been able to do that the last couple of years in the postseason.
You mentioned the regular season, and look, I still think that the most difficult team accomplishment in baseball is winning your division. Over 162 game season, to be the best team in your division. You guys have now won 96 games, 95 games. You've won more games each year the last 4 years. You've won your division 2 years in a row. But, I keep thinking about a conversation that I had with Kyle Schwarber back in July at the All-Star game. We were standing around his locker, and he said to me, it's like, I've been lucky enough to get to the playoffs in 9 of my 10 years. Now it's 10 out of 11. And he said, like, every time with every team, we thought we could win the World Series. We expected to win the World Series. But I've only won it once, and I've only even gotten there twice. And it kind of amplifies to me, like, how difficult it is to win tournament baseball, because it's totally different, as you said, from the regular season. The regular season is kind of an endurance test. And in the tournament, it's more random. I think a game can turn on a play here or a play there. We saw that in this series against the Dodgers. How do you sort of fall on, like, when you look back on a season, you want to be really proud of what you did over the course of 162 games, and yet, like you said, we tend to be judged by how a team does in the postseason.
Yeah, I think especially in Philadelphia, the East Coast, the bigger markets, you're judged by the postseason period. I don't think anybody wants to hear that you won 95, 96 games, but it's a difficult thing to get through that postseason. I think, you see every year there's a hero that in the regular season was a below average player, or his career was below average. Buddy Biancalana for the Kansas City Royals way back in the day. Nobody knows who he is, but he was on David Letterman because he was a star in the postseason. You have things that have to happen like that. And for us, unfortunately, it just hasn't happened like that in the postseason. But very proud of what the front office, what our coaching staff and our players have done over the last 4 years, increasing our win total every year, I think, since going back to 18, other than the pandemic year, which is something special. I don't think that's been done ever. I think a lot of people have started to talk a little bit about the Braves in the 90s, how many times they won the division and didn't win the World Series, one World Series title at all those divisions. And back then, you would say it's probably a little easier to win the World Series because there was less games that you had to win. Now, you might have to go through a wild card and division series, championship series. So it's a little bit more difficult now than it ever has been. And like I said, it's just disappointing when you have such a good team. You play so good the whole season, and then all of a sudden, there's a couple games where you don't catch a couple breaks or you don't do things well, and you're eliminated. And then you have to wait all the way until next spring training to try it again. But, I'm proud of what we've done the last 5-6 years. But like I said, there's a lot of people who don't want to hear about that. They want the parade down Broad Street and the trophy being raised. And hopefully, we can maintain that winning consistency during the regular season and catch a few breaks here the next couple of years.
You coach third base, you coach the catchers. It's part of your job to help, kind of execute the game plan, put in the game plan, execute the game plan. So much work goes into that, especially in the postseason when you're focusing in on one opponent and it's everything is so heightened. How do you kind of balance? Because there's this thought that like the playoffs are random, or it's a crapshoot, or how do you balance all of the preparation and all of the things and all of the time and energy that you put into it with sort of the randomness of a throw from Trey Turner on one side of the bag versus the other, a bunt play that works or doesn't work, just a collection of maybe little things that fell the Dodgers' way and didn't fall your way and could have easily gone the other direction.
Yeah, I think, for the game planning part of it, I don't do a whole lot of that. I give credit to Caleb Cotham, JT on a lot of that. But the randomness that falls in the game while it's going is so magnified during the playoffs. Everybody's watching. These things happen during the regular season. Nobody kind of notices. And I give a perfect example. If anybody watched the game the other night, Carlos Fablis sends a guy, I think it was Vladdy, throws offline, he scores. Everybody says it's a great send. Oh, gosh, this was a tremendous send. Later on, the game ball goes down the right field corner. They make a great relay, throw him out at the plate. Everybody says, Carlos Fablis, what are you doing? Why are you sending him? So, we as third base coaches for sure want to know where that throw is going to be. And all we can do is go by the homework where we've done the video and things like that. So that's the things you talk about, like the randomness, like throws offline, Vladdy's safe. They got the lead. It looks great. Everything's going good. And then somebody makes a great throw or the throw of their life, which is what you're trying to expect a lot of times. And it turns the other way. And like you alluded to, Trey throwing the ball on a tough play to JT's right a little bit. If he throws it to the left, maybe he's out, maybe he's not. Maybe we drop the ball. Who knows? Maybe they call him safe.
Sure.
You don't know. But, yeah, I mean, those are the breaks that you have to catch. And, I think if you go back and look at any team that wins a World Series, no matter how many wins they had in the regular season, they're going to catch a break here and there. You go back to the 08 team, and that was my first year managing the minor leagues with the Phillies. It was 08. I was managing Williamsport. And you look at the breaks that they caught there. I mean, we score a game-winning run on a swing and bunt. Utley's great play up the middle where he fakes the first, throws to the plate. One hopper. You got all kinds of people there. Romero's there. Chooch is there. The umpire's falling in. He's out at home plate. That could easily be safe. I mean, it was a great play by everybody, but that throws off just a little bit. They score. Who knows what happens? So I know a lot of fans don't want to hear it, but it's the game of baseball. It's the game of sports. One shot in the NBA finals changes guys' lives. One catch in the end zone in the NFL and a Super Bowl changes everybody's lives. So it's just magnified. It's why we play. But I think for baseball, it gets a little bit more frustrating because we play so many games. I mean, 162 games, travel all over the country, sometimes out of the country, another 20-something games in spring training. So to have it end like it ends, it's hard, that's for sure. But, I don't think we'd have it any other way. I think the way that baseball's got it right now, we've got the best teams in the playoffs, and that's what everybody wants to see. And this playoff has been a great playoff to watch from a fan's perspective.
Okay, before we totally close the book on the Dodger series, I have to ask, because you were standing right there, for your perspective on that bunt play in game 2. Not that anyone needs their memory refreshed, but bottom of the 9th, nobody out, down 4-3 after the Castellanos 2-run double. There's no pinch runner available because A, you're going to use Harrison Bader as a pinch hitter later in the inning, and you've got to hold Weston Wilson back to run for him in case he gets on base. And B, Yohan Rojas is injured and not available. He's not on the Division Series roster. So the Dodgers bring in a lefty, Alex Vesia, to face Bryson Stott, who's a left-handed hitter. You're coaching third. You get the sign to have Stott bunt. Stott shows bunt, ball 1. Bunt play stays on. And, take it from there. Tell us from your perspective what you saw, because obviously that's a decision and a play that, the Dodgers execute perfectly there to get the runner out at third. And, again, you talk about execution on the relay throw the other night at home plate. Muncy makes a great throw. Mookie executes the wheel play, but you're standing right there. That play got a lot of attention during the series. What's your perspective on how it kind of unfolded?
So one is, the Dodgers have never run that play in I don't know how many years. We've never seen them do it. And also there's a runner only on second base. So it's a tag situation. So it's even harder. So it's going to have to be a great throw. It's not a force out situation. They ran it perfect. They never run it. I know there's been stories now that they just talked about running it while they were standing on the mound. So, I mean, you got to give the other team credit sometimes. I thought Bryson put a great bunt down. Nick, he runs the third base. If the throw's off, again, we talk about being perfect. That was a perfect play. If that throws off a little bit, Nick's safe. It's first and third. Everybody's saying, wow, what a great play. Great job bunting him over. But when it doesn't work out, there's always something wrong, right? You can't ever give somebody else credit. And it's almost like society now. No one wants to give somebody else credit just for doing a good job. There's a reason that things happen. But I thought it was just a great baseball play all around. Stott did his job. They did their job a little bit better than we did our job. But I don't think there was much more that Stott could have done than maybe slash a little bit. But they hid the play pretty good. I thought personally after they did it one time that they weren't going to do it again. I think Stott was under the same impression. So I think it's just one of those plays that, again, a play in the series that if we look back, we end up executing it. They don't get an out or they just get an out at first base. Who knows what happens and the thing's different. But I thought it was just a well-executed baseball play by everybody and didn't work out in our favor.
I agree. You don't know how many times, like during the course of the year, you hear people scream, small ball. Why doesn't anyone know how to play small ball anymore or move a runner or put a bunt down? And that was a case where, I thought it was a really great baseball play, as you said, and then they executed perfectly to defend it. But I always like kind of creating the action, right? If you can force the defense to have to make a play. I mean, maybe Muncy makes that throw and he throws wide to third base and you score a run. Forget about being safe at third. Maybe you score a run out of it. So I couldn't agree more. I think it was a good baseball play all around and really well executed. All right, enough about the Dodgers series. One subject that I've always loved talking to you about, and this is going to become relevant with the offseason now almost upon us, is JT Realmuto and his longevity behind the plate. He started a career-high 132 games back there this year at age 34. That is not supposed to happen. I went back 80 years to 1945, and I found only, only 9 instances of a catcher aged 34 or older starting 132 or more games in a season. Bob Boone did it 5 times, which is amazing. Jason Kendall, when he was 34, started 149 games. Elston Howard at 35 started 141. Yadier Molina at 34 started 133. Tony Pena at 34 also started 132, like JT. And now JT, that's it. That's the list. So as a guy who's worked more closely with JT than anyone over the last 7 years, I wonder if you could tell me, A, why he's able to maintain this workload at his age when almost no catchers are able to do it or are in a position to do it. And B, why is JT kind of worth betting on to be able to do this for another 2, maybe 3, who knows, even more years?
Well, first of all, God gifted him with a great body and great work ethic and being able to take care of it. I mean, he takes care of his body as good as anybody I've ever been around. So, I mean, at the end of the season, we were talking when we were all packing up kind of a couple days later, and I really didn't know how old he was. We were talking about it. I said, how old are you going to be next year? He said, well, I'm going to be 35. Yeah. I mean, you would never know looking at him, talking to him, the way he acts, the way he runs, the way he takes care of himself, that he's that age. But yeah, I mean, it's a crazy thing that he can start that many games and be so fresh. And honestly, this year, the second half of the season was pretty darn good, really, offensive side of it. So I think he just takes care of himself. He wants it so bad. He loves the game of baseball. He loves catching. And I think maybe the one knee stance has helped a little bit. I know he's talked about it when he first came over here. We switched over to one knee. That was kind of when it was becoming in vogue to go to one knee more. And he said that it's taken a lot of wear and tear off of his knees and back. But athletically, he's so good at hopping into stances and things like that that I don't think that's affected him much. But, he's had a couple little nagging things here and there, but nothing major. So I think he's just gifted and, and works hard at keeping his body in shape. And, the guy works out every single day after the game. I mean, it's impressive. Whether we're leaving to fly across the country, whether we have a day off the next day, he's in that weight room doing something every day to get himself ready for the next day.
Yeah, I remember him talking about that during the 2022 World Series, kind of how he tweaked his routine at a certain point. And, it's like 15 minutes after every game, and it's something he sticks to, and it works for him. And, you talked about his athleticism. He's obviously got a wrestling background. He was, I think, a shortstop in high school, and the Marlins kind of put him behind the plate when they drafted him. And so his physical abilities are evident. And his toughness speaks for itself, right? I mean, nobody gets dinged up more back there, foul balls off the hand, off the mask, off many other sensitive parts. And he just kind of keeps on going, right? And, but the thing that stands out to me the last few years is you talk to the pitchers, right? Zach Wheeler swears by him. Christopher Sanchez, that game in September where JT took the foul ball off the hand kind of late in the season, Christopher was talking after the game, and he said, we're basically nothing without JT. I wonder over the years, working with him, how much you've seen him grow in that area in terms of game calling and just kind of being the quarterback on the field, sort of taking charge, and also how much homework he does, how much work he puts in before every game to really help Caleb and the pitching people kind of put together, hey, here's what we're going to do against this specific lineup.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, his durability has been something. There's a lot of guys that miss a lot of games for little knick-knack things here and there, and JT's never going to miss a game for that. But the way that he prepares is second to none. I mean, this guy does as much homework as anybody I've ever seen. And, he doesn't rely on the pitching staff, Caleb and Mark Lowy, our assistant pitching coach, as much as some other guys do. What he does is he does his own homework. He gets a little kind of a cheat sheet to start, and then he does his own homework, and then they come together and compare it, and they go from there. But what JT's really good at, I think, is in-game adjustments. Something will look good, like, out of the gate, we're supposed to throw this guy breaking balls, and a guy will take a swing on a pitch, and he'll say, wait a minute, we need to can that today. We're going to make an adjustment and maybe go to another pitch against that guy. And he can do that in at bats, in game. And I think that's a special thing. There's a lot of guys that can do their homework, follow a game plan, and go from there. But the special guys are the guys that are in the fourth inning. I got to make an adjustment to what they're making an adjustment to us, because the game is all about making adjustments, and the quicker adjustment usually wins. And JT's really, really good at seeing those little things and making the adjustment fast.
I'd argue that there's more on a catcher's plate in 2025 than there's ever been before. And there's going to be something new next year with the automated ball strike system, which is coming to the big leagues. As a catching coach, I wonder how much you're preparing for that. I know Topper was saying in spring training that, like, he thinks, he might prefer the challenges to come from the catcher rather than the pitcher, because the pitcher's a little bit more emotional about the pitch he's just thrown, and maybe the catcher has a better perspective. I don't know if that's still stuff that you guys are kind of working through, like how we're going to put this to use and how we're going to what our best practices are going to be here. Is that kind of a big part of your off season, is kind of digging in as much as you can on ABS?
Yeah, honestly, started a couple of years ago, really, when they really started putting the ABS in AAA. Talked to a lot of the AAA staff, last couple spring trainings, talked to catchers that have been down there, Marshawn, Stubbs. What do they think about it? Ideas, how do they do it? I think for the most part, in most clubs, you won't see the pitcher challenge much, because it's just a hard perspective from a pitcher to see exactly where the ball crossed the plate. I think you're going to see a lot from the catchers and hitters. And I think one thing we talked about midway through this year, when it looked like it was kind of a foreseeable thing that this was going to happen next year, was that we want to try to catch as many bullpens next year with the ABS system on, and challenge our guys to let us know, was that a ball or was it a strike, so that they can learn the system as fast as possible and as well as possible. And I think we did that in spring training with the games. The guys would come back in between innings, not challenge one or challenge one. They learned a little bit. And, I would say, hey, should you have challenged that one? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, no, it was just a little bit off. So we started doing it last year in spring training, because you know how it is. When it gets that close, it's going to happen, whether it was 26, 27, 28. It was right there. It was going to happen. So we kind of already started preparing for this a couple years ago, and then really took advantage of it, I think, in spring training. So I think next spring training will be more we're still going to practice our receiving and things like that. But I think the guys that are going to be really elite at knowing the strike zone as far as catchers are going to have an advantage.
Catcher framing, right, is something that we've talked about a lot over the years. Does that kind of go by the wayside now with ABS, or, do you maybe de-emphasize it in terms of like what you want your catchers to do and how you want them to catch the ball back there?
Yeah, it's something we discussed. I'm not sure exactly for sure yet. I think there's still going to be something to it. We've discussed, is it better to be a bad framer but know the strike zone to get the other team to challenge? I think for the foreseeable future, it's going to be fairly the same. You might see a little bit more targeting as far as a target where guys want it, as opposed to taking the glove out of the strike zone and getting a little bit below the zone and trying to catch the ball staying in the zone. You might see a little bit longer target that some of the pitchers like better. So if that helps them. So we're not fully confident in what we're going to do yet. That's what we've been talking about. We're talking about it over the winter, talk about it before spring training, and get together with some of the minor league catchers, some of the minor league coaches, what they've been doing, what we think, and the pitchers, and see how they feel. What can benefit you the most, because obviously we want to get the most strikes possible. So it's still a work in progress, I'd say.
Couple of really quick ones before we let you run. There were, I believe, as many as 9 at one point managerial openings in baseball this month. I think we're down to 5 now. You've interviewed for manager jobs in the past. Your dad managed the Royals. You managed a long time in the minor leagues. You're now in the Reading Baseball Hall of Fame, managed there for quite some time. I wonder if it's still an ambition of yours to eventually manage in the big leagues, and kind of where you stand in terms of, wanting or not wanting to. You've been in the Phillies organization now, I think, 20 years and are one of the best third base coaches in baseball. Where do you stand in terms of wanting to manage someday? Is that still an ambition?
Yeah, I think it's definitely an ambition still. I tell people that it's probably a little bit different situation than where it was 5-6 years ago. I think now the situation is going to have to be right for myself. I think 5-6 years ago, if you would have said interview for this job and then we're going to give it to you, I'd have said, okay, I don't care where it is, West Coast, East Coast, how good or bad the team's going to be. I would have just jumped on it to try to manage. But, with the success we've had with the Phillies, with the loyalty they've been to me in the organization, being here for, 2 years as a minor league player, 10 years as a minor league manager. And this next year will be my 9th year at third base in the big leagues. I really enjoy where I'm at. I love the Phillies. If you would have told me that I was going to be here 20 years when I signed a minor league free agent deal, I would have said, you're crazy. But I've learned this organization is just family, and I love it to death. I want to bring a World Series here more than anything. I feel what the fans feel. But if the right situation comes up, then that might be something that happens, but it'll have to be the right situation. I feel like when I go into those interviews now, I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me for their plan in the organization, what's their goals, because I think we have such a great organization that I'm so comfortable here, and my family loves it here, that it's going to have to be the right situation right now, because I love coaching third base. It's the closest thing to playing. You actually determine what happens on the field. Every other position as a coach, you have predetermined things, and you can't do anything in the middle of the game. At third base, as we saw with Carlos last night or a couple nights ago, that you have something to do with the game, whether that's positive or negative. So it's just like a player. You can boot a ball and you can be a hero. Either way, they're all supposed to be safe. But I love it here, and we'll see what happens in the future with the manager.
Okay, maybe we end on this. Your dad, as we said, played for the Royals. He roomed with George Brett in spring training. I love the story that you've told about, I think you told it, I think the first time I heard you tell it was when the Phillies went to Kansas City several years ago, about the time that George came over to babysit and let you watch the jerk and wound up falling asleep on the couch. But your dad also managed the Royals during the first 4 full seasons of Bo Jackson's career. And maybe it's because I grew up in the 80s. You and I are not far apart in age. Maybe I've always been sort of fascinated by Bo. I try to explain to friends and colleagues who are a little younger about the phenomenon that was Bo Jackson in the late 80s. You must have a go-to Bo Jackson story from kind of being around him in 87, 88, 89. I guess you would have been like around high schoolish? Yeah.
Yeah,
So probably bat boying, and you must have a kind of a go-to Bo Jackson story.
Yeah, well, it's crazy. So my dad becomes manager in August of 87. I think Bo was in AA that year. Well, Bo played at Auburn, as most everybody knows, I think. But his baseball coach was Hal Baird. Hal Baird was my dad's college roommate. So I had been going to Auburn baseball camp as a little kid a couple times. We'd went to the Auburn, Alabama football game. I'd met Bo there prior to my dad managing. It might have been the first winter he was going to manage. So Bo would come over to the house with Hal when he was in town. Hal would come in to see Bo, and they'd come over because I used to call Hal Uncle Nandy's because he used to bring me candy when I was a little kid, and I couldn't say candy. So I know him for a long time. But yeah, Bo was a great guy. Loved his family. Great family man. But I guess the one story that people laugh at all the time, and the relationship that he and I had was, I used to bat boy and ball boy down the left field line, play catch with them, all that stuff. So we had a lot of interactions. Well, I'm in junior college in California a couple years later, and I'm coming up to John Wayne Airport to pick up my mom. And she's already standing there. No cell phones back then, the plane came in early a little bit or whatever. I pull up and Bo's standing there and my mom's standing there. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is not going to be good. He's going to give me some grief for this. He goes, listen here, you never be late for your mama. She's done so much for you. You make sure you're here to pick her up on time. I said, all right, Bo, thanks, buddy. But that's the kind of guy he was. And, but the special things on the field were, the throw from left field at the Kingdome. He could do things that no one else could do. I've seen him grab a bow in a clubhouse and dead middle of a target from 30 yards without even knowing whose bow it was. Just the special things that he could do as an athlete were crazy, but great human being as well as an athlete. So it was a very special time in my life to be able to hang around him and kind of have a lot of good interactions through my high school years with him.
That's great. Bo knows. Do not be late for your mom at the airport. Like a lecture from Bo Jackson. That's got to be like unlike anything else.
Oh yeah.
So, well, Dusty, this was so much fun. We're just getting started with the off season, but spring training is going to be here before we know it. So, thank you for being here. Enjoy the rest of your off season, and we really, really appreciate you spending a few minutes with us at Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I want to thank Dusty Wathan again for joining me. It's time to open the reporter's notebook, and for that, I'll bring in David Murphy, columnist extraordinaire and my Inquirer teammate. Murph, thanks so much for hopping on.
Anytime, Scott.
We haven't seen each other since that night in the press box at Dodger Stadium after the Phillies season ended. And with 3 weeks to chew on it, I'm sure we both have some thoughts about the series and the season that didn't occur to us immediately at the time. I want to start, though, with this Bryce Harper soap opera, and that's really what it is, because you and I have been around for a while. We've covered our share of intramural spats, player versus player, player versus management, player versus coach. But I'm not sure, and I don't know how you feel, I'm not sure I've ever covered one quite like this because I don't know where it came from, and I think I know where it's going, but I'm not sure. You did a great job laying out the particulars in the column this week that I encourage everyone to read, and we can go over sort of the Cliff Notes version at some point during our conversation. But, I have a theory about how we got here, from Dave Dombrowski's candid answer to a question about a down season to Harper telling The Athletic that he feels hurt by trade talk, none of which came from Dombrowski or anyone or really nothing that exists in the first place. But first, I want to hear your thoughts and your theory. Take it in any direction you want. The floor is yours.
Well, yeah, as you mentioned, I wrote about this in a column that ran in the Inquirer today, I believe. And I'm with you 100%. In fact, I think I wrote it that this is, as far as I can recollect, this is the strangest spat that I've ever seen. Mostly because, look, I respect Bryce Harper, but for a guy who fashions himself as kind of an alpha male, buck stops here, put it all on my shoulders kind of guy. It's very hard for me to believe that he actually felt emotionally hurt by, which is the word that he used, by what Dave Dombrowski said. Now, look, I can certainly understand where, from Bryce Harper's perspective, he felt a little bit of disrespect on the part of Dombrowski, and I look, I raised half an eyebrow when Dombrowski he just kept the problem is he kept on talking. I think he was trying to kind of couch and walk back what he had said in his press conference about Harper, and he just ended up kind of digging the hole even deeper. But to me, the strange part about it was the timing of it, where I can understand if Harper kind of felt a little bit a prickle of disrespect upon hearing Dombrowski's comments, but Harper himself didn't weigh in until close to 2 weeks after the comments, and by that point in time, Dombrowski had already made it very clear that they're not trading. I mean, in fact, he explicitly said, "We're not trading Bryce Harper. We love Bryce Harper." And even his agent Scott Boras weighed in and essentially said, "Nah, there's really no smoke here. I wish Dave would have pointed out the risk concerns. But other than that, Bryce Harper needs more protection." So, long story short, I'm with you, and I kind of sat down yesterday not really understanding it's like hard to make sense out of the situation because there's really no sense to make. And the one thing I landed on is I keep coming back to what Boras said. I think it was the Zalecki about the protection in the lineup, and it would make sense to me if Scott Boras as well as anybody, and he's always looking for a chance to push the rich to spend more money. And I think, it would not surprise me at all if they both want Pete Alonso here at first base, and that's kind of what all this is about. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah. So look, as a general rule, I try to avoid being a conspiracy theorist, but I also rule out nothing when it comes to the motivations of executives or athletes. I do think Dombrowski was trying to get Harper's attention with that comment, and it did raise my eyebrows, both of them, I think, sitting in that room. The last time someone really poked Harper, it was Orlando Arcia in the 2023 playoffs, and look what happened, right? Harper hits 2 home runs and stares down the Braves shortstop. And so I don't think it's a bad idea coming off of a down season for Dombrowski to say he had a down season. Like Bryce Harper has admitted that himself. This was not his standard year. But maybe if he poked him and he did it publicly, and then I thought it was telling that Rob Thompson comes on after Dombrowski that day, and he said he thought Harper would be, quote unquote, highly motivated to have the best year of his career. And so I asked a follow-up question, and I said, did he say something to you on his way out the door that would lead you to think that? And Thompson said, no, it's just a feeling I have based on the kind of person Harper is. So it seemed to me like a coordinated effort on both of their parts, maybe to good cop, bad cop him, poke him, and then say, all right, he's going to be highly motivated, and okay, great. But then it got really confusing after that. And I think some of our friends in the media, both locally and nationally, maybe read into those comments more than they should have or more than they deserve to be read into. And I think people started to say, I wonder if they sort of tied it to the contract issue. Like Harper, we know Harper wants to renegotiate his contract or at least get years tacked on. So people sort of tied the comments Dombrowski made to the contract. I don't think they were related ever. Anyone who knows John Middleton knows how badly he wants Bryce Harper to A, retire as a Philly, and B, go into the Hall of Fame as a Philly. So the notion that they would entertain trying to get him to waive his – first of all, he has 10-5 trade rights. He can't be traded unless he's willing to waive that. And they have the owner has no desire to trade him. So I think two issues got conflated maybe. But then I think, and this is where I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but I can't help it. I do think that Scott Boras said, maybe this is an opening, because in Harper's desire to get his contract renegotiated, he's never had any leverage. He doesn't have an opt-out. The Phillies have no incentive to reopen this deal. It would be unprecedented in baseball to reopen a contract and redo it in the middle of it. So I don't know. Maybe Boras was like, this is a way of maybe bringing us to the table, at least with John Middleton. If Bryce says he was hurt by these comments and these insinuations, which there was never any insinuation, maybe it at least gets us into the conversation and creates a smidge of leverage with the Phillies to try to get what we want. I thought it was telling that, like, look, I reached out to Scott Boras last week, didn't hear back from him. It didn't even occur to me to reach out to Bryce Harper, because what was there to reach out about? There was no trade talk. And then Dombrowski goes on foul territory and says, we're not trying to trade him. So I'm not exactly sure that we're having the same conversation here on both sides of the situation.
Yeah, look, I think that's a very valid theory, and I think that, frankly, it's the one that it's probably it's one of the more likely scenarios, and it's frankly the only one that I could identify at first. Part of me actually wonders if you really want to get if you really want to go deep into the weeds, like, part of me wonders if the whole contract thing on Bryce Harper's part, which itself was weird when it was raised last year and kind of came from out of nowhere. Part of me wonders if that was more that was actually leverage. Again, part of me thinks Harper really believes that he needs somebody hitting behind him who's not Alec Boehm, who's not Brandon Marsh, who JT Realmuto kind of did it for a year after Rhys Hoskins left, but he's, and no disrespect to JT, he kind of is who he is at this point. He's just not that guy. Look, I think Bryce Harper wants to win more than anything, and I think that's why the contract talk last year really puzzled me, because it would seem to fly in the face, giving Bryce Harper, more money, that's coming out of somebody's pocket, right? And it's going to make them less capable of winning, which is why it was weird to me that that's where he went. But I think we've heard him say it kind of, he has said, I'm willing to move off first base, if we bring somebody else in. He's told people that. I know my sense this year, no one told me this explicitly, but I really got the sense from being around that guys were not thrilled with the Max Kepler signing necessarily. Now, I think Michael Conforto was a guy that some guys wanted, and that, in Dombrowski's defense, would not have worked out any better. But I think they all realized, really, this team, it's very clear that this team is missing a middle of the order bat. And I think, Dombrowski kind of is clearly feeling a little bit of heat from that, because he brought it up. I don't know if it was in response to something that I've written or something that you wrote, but in that press conference, he kind of brought up unprompted how he's read people saying that the Phillies need this or they need that, and he kind of poo-pooed it and said, we're not going to have a $400 million payroll. But look, the Dodgers are who they are because they have that extra bat. They have Will Smith, they have Freddie Freeman, they have Mookie Betts, but then they also have Teoscar Hernandez, who's hitting fourth or fifth depending on the night. That's what you need. You can't have, and I feel Bryce Harper on this, and I feel Kyle Schwarber on this, that the the blame that's thrown their way is justifiable, because look, at the end of the day, the Phillies are constructed in a way where they need Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber to hit. But baseball is the sort of game where those two guys, you can't have two guys expected to carry that big of a load, because the game just doesn't go that way. We saw it with Shohei Ohtani, where you're going to have a series where you strike out in half your plate appearances. And I think Bryce Harper's kind of looking at it like, hey, this is a little unfair. He focused on the wrist and having the kid, but because he doesn't want to throw his teammates under the bus. But the biggest unfairness is Bryce Harper feels like he has to win the game by himself, because he knows he has to turn it over to Alec Boehm or Brandon Marsh behind him, and as good as they can be in the right role, that's not the role. There's such a huge drop off after Harper in the order, or after Schwarber in the order, depending on how they're hitting, that I think this team, that he looks at it, they're looking at this and they're saying, we need Alex Bregman, we need a Pete Alonso, if there is a
Scott
takeoff.
Boras is looking at it that way. He's pushing.
Well, yeah, and that's why I think that's why it kind of all makes sense to me if that's almost the play. And look, frankly, I think the Phillies should look at it. I think the Phillies should I think the Phillies should listen to him. I think it's pretty clear that they got lucky to play the Dodgers as close as they did. Like Shohei Ohtani's not going to strike out 9 out of 18 at bats in a lot of playoff series. The frustrating part about the series is it was there to win, and if you replay that series 10 times, they probably got the one time where they were closest to winning.
Yeah.
They really do need to add another piece, and I don't know how they're going to do it other than spending money.
Yeah, the lineup protection thing is really interesting, and I wrote about this last week in the Inquirer. Early in the season, back in April, they flip-flopped. They rearranged the lineup so that Schwarber was hitting behind Harper, and at the time, Rob Thompson said we want to give teams less incentive to walk Harper. So that went on for about a month, and the weird part of that arrangement with Schwarber batting behind Harper was that Harper actually wasn't seeing any more pitches in the zone with Schwarber behind him. And I remember talking to Harper about it in Cleveland before a game, and he said, "I know, it's weird. Like, why am I not getting more pitches in the zone with Schwarber behind me? He's on pace for 60 home runs." And I do think if they had stuck with that, it probably would have ended up that way, that Harper did start to see more pitches in the zone. Problem was Harper hurt his wrist in June, missed a month. When he came back, Schwarber was in sort of such a groove that they left Schwarber in the 2 spot, batted Harper third, and for the rest of the season, it was some mishmash of Bohm, Castellanos, and Realmuto behind Harper, not the same lineup protection as if Schwarber was there. And, I thought back to late in the season, Arizona, Bohm comes back, and he has a big series. He goes like 8 for 13 coming off the IL. And I was talking to Harper, and we were talking about like, hey, if Bohm keeps swinging the bat like this, maybe you'll see more pitches in the zone. And Harper goes, yeah, I doubt it. And he kind of like backtracked because he didn't want to make it sound like he was insulting Bohm. But his point was like, I see fewer pitches in the zone than anybody. So like Alec Bohm's not changing that. Nobody's changing that because Kyle Schwarber didn't change that early in the season. So, look, teams are going to go, hey, we play the Phillies. We're not going to let Bryce Harper beat us. And he's either going to have to do more damage on the pitches he does get in the zone. And I think that was telling for me because, I really dug into the numbers, and he actually didn't see fewer pitches in the zone, like percentage-wise. It was pretty close this year to past years. The difference was the damage he did on those pitches in the zone. And it was like way down. His slug this year was like 500s on pitches in the zone, whereas previous years it was in the 600s and even 700s. He punished pitchers for pitching for throwing him strikes in the past. That wasn't the case this year. For whatever reason, whether it was the wrist, whether it was something else, that's what's going to have to change, because I don't think all of a sudden, people are going to pitch to him because you've got Kyle Schwarber behind him or anybody else for that matter.
No, and so there's a few things. First of all, I think that, and I remember this going all the way back to when I was on the beat, and Ryan Howard protection was always a big talking point. And the analytics at that time, at least, suggested that protection in quantifiable terms is a bit overrated. I think you have to look no further than the World Series to kind of see it. Where Shohei Ohtani's leading off, and he's got 3 former MVPs behind him, or 2 former MVPs behind him, and a potential one in Will Smith. And they're still walking him to lead off the game. So he's got 3 Kyle Schwarbers
4 times in a row the other night.
Right. So he's got 3 Kyle Schwarbers behind him, and that's not changing the way the Blue Jays are going out their business. But I do think, and I think this is probably what Bryce Harper and Scott Boras would tell you, is that protection, to me, it's more psychological protection, where he may not get any more pitches to hit inside the zone, but he's going to feel less pressure to make something happen outside of the zone if he knows that he's got two guys behind him who can do just as much damage and who can knock him in. I mean, look at it. I forget which game it was. I think probably game 2. The ninth, whatever the bunt game.
Yeah.
Harper singles through the right side of the infield. He was up, I think, with he was either the tying run or Schwarber was the tying run behind him, and you're waiting for this big Bryce Harper moment, and instead he loops one through the right side of the infield, and you're like, all right, well that works. The baton got passed, but it didn't lead to anything, And I think Bryce Harper, knowing his mentality, he comes away from that being like, well, I would have been better off, trying to do it myself. And so I think that's the protection that he would get with a guy like, however they stack the lineup, a guy like Alonso or Bregman behind him, where he would be like, you know what, he would probably walk more than he's walked in years. I think that's probably more what it is. The second thing is when you actually look at the numbers, the results were down this year, but I kept looking, I kept digging under the hood to try to find some evidence that Bryce Harper, there was something physically that led to the results, and there really wasn't much. I think his bat speed maybe was down, 7 miles an hour, but that's kind of that metric is still in kind of beta phase, and we don't really know what it means. But everything else, his exit velocity, his contact rate, his strikeout rate, his walk rate, they were all well within his norms. And if you look at his career, the one thing that's kind of differentiates him from guys like Ohtani or some of these guys that just, even Schwarber, where every year Schwarber puts up the exact same batting line. There's been a lot of variance with Bryce Harper, now it's all variance within the realm of elite, but he's had plenty. This season was actually a lot like his first year in Philadelphia in 2019, if you look at the numbers. So I think that's actually encouraging that even with the risk, even with having the baby, I think that there's nothing pointing to the fact that Bryce Harper is a step further down on the decline. This was just kind of one of those years, and yeah, I think that it's a huge thing that the Phillies need to try to figure out, because clearly I think it's an issue internally. With Schwarber would never let it affect them or never let it slip, but with Harper, I think he's getting a little frustrated because it's been 3 years since Rhys Hoskins left now, and they just have not done anything. And you look around the league, even at Toronto, where you need that third power bat. There's a reason. A 5-hole hitter it's a very distinct thing. You think of Teoscar, you think of I know he hits cleanup a lot, but he's kind of that prototypical number 5 hitter, and that's the Phillies need that. You can't have a lineup that falls off a cliff, run production wise, the way theirs did this postseason. And let me say this too, I think part of what Dombrowski might be getting a little frustrated with is he might look at it and say, look, Nick Castellanos is your boy. We paid him a bunch of money to come in here to be that guy. JT Realmuto is your boy. We made a big trade and signed him to a big contract that was top of the market. At some point in time, it's like yeah, it'd be great if we could just sign Scott Boris's entire roster of clients to come in here. But at some point in time, the guys who are getting paid, sign Trey Turner, Bryce Harper's boy. At some point, the guys who are getting this money need to put up production equivalent with that money.
Yeah, look, Dave Dombrowski's right. Bryce Harper had a down year by his standards, but I think Bryce Harper could probably, if he wanted to, turn that back around on Dave Dombrowski and say, last offseason in free agency, You got Jordan Romano, Max Kepler, and Joe Ross. So you got to be a little bit better yourself.
It's funny. I was thinking about that because Harper's comments just struck me as so weird that I was just like trying to make sense of them. And I actually talked myself into seeing how Harper could have actually gotten a little disrespected by what Dombrowski said. And I was kind of thinking of Bryce Harper if he was like had an end of the season press conference and they asked him about Dave Dombrowski's performance and he had kind of evaluated Dave Dombrowski's performance the same way. I think Dombrowski probably would have been a little. If Harper said, look, Dave Dombrowski, he's always been one of the top general managers in the game, but look, did he have a Dave Dombrowski year? No. I mean, Jordan Romano, Joe Ross, Max Kepler, we need him to be better than that, and so then that kind of puts things in perspective. And I think that's probably where Harper is looking at it. Like, look, man, all you had to do was if Jordan Romano, if that salary slot and roster slot to Jordan Romano is somebody who can actually pitch a 7th or 8th inning of a tight game, who knows? Phillies might be in the World Series right now.
Yeah, the only thing that would have made this whole situation any weirder would have been if Freddie Freeman, who kind of got caught in the middle of this, right? Because Dave Dombrowski used Freddie Freeman oddly as an example of an elite player who is not quite as elite, is like percentage points lower than elite now than he used to be. If Freddie Freeman, after hitting that home run in the 18th inning the other night, had thanked Dave Dombrowski for kind of like, hey, thanks for dragging me into this. You inspired me to hit that home run in the 8th. That would have been the only thing that would have made this any weirder or let it go on any longer.
Yeah, poor Freddie. Poor Freddie definitely caught a stray.
Poor Freddie. Why was he catching strays there? I don't know. But anyway, let's pause this conversation because there's so much more ground to cover, but we have a long off season to do it. So I'm glad we tied a bow on the Harper situation. I think it's fascinating. And Murph, thanks again for jumping on. I know we'll be talking again and seeing each other again soon. Okay, it's time now for Hit and Run, where we take a question from you out there. Want to join the conversation? Drop me an email at slauber@inquirer.com or reach out on the social media platform of your choice, X, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, or you can always drop a line in the comments section on YouTube as well. This week's question comes from Megan Riley at Flyers2601 on X, who asks, what do you think the Phillies will do with Nick Castellanos, and who do you think will be his replacement? Well, Megan, the second part of your question suggests you already know the answer to the first. And look, Dave Dombrowski hasn't come right out and said it, but every sense that I've gotten is that your hunch is right. Castellanos quite likely won't be back next season. It's kind of past a point of no return. But here's the thing. I think every other team knows that too. So the Phillies will find out probably early in the offseason if Castellanos is tradable or if they're going to have to just release him. Either way, they're going to be on the hook for most, if not all, of the $20 million that he'll make next year. Under different circumstances, Dombrowski and owner John Middleton might say, well, if we're going to pay this guy's salary, he might as well play for us. But among 146 players who got at least 500 plate appearances this season, Castellanos ranked 146th in Fangraphs wins above replacement, meaning he was, statistically, the worst player in baseball. He also lost his starting job after more than 10 seasons as an everyday player in the majors. And he had multiple blow-ups directed at manager Rob Thompson. In June, he got benched for one game for making what Thompson described as a, quote, inappropriate comment in the dugout after being replaced for defense in the 9th inning. Then in September, Castellanos criticized Thompson for a lack of communication, which raised more than a few eyebrows in the clubhouse because most players regard the manager as a good communicator. Thompson is returning next season, which means Castellanos almost certainly won't. Who will replace him? Well, at this point, it's hard to say. The outfield could look completely different next season. Justin Crawford will probably be out there on opening day, either in center field or left. If the Phillies think he can handle center, they could go with Brandon Marsh as the lefty hitting side of a platoon in left field. If the Phillies prefer Crawford in left field, Marsh would either have to play center or right, again in a timeshare. My sense is the Phillies' payroll is going to be close to where it was this year, which was right in the $312 million range for luxury tax purposes, which was the 4th highest number in baseball. Re-signing Kyle Schwarber and to a similar extent JT Realmuto will be their number one offseason priority. If that happens, it's difficult to see them being able to fit another big-time free agent within that payroll. It's possible then that the Phillies will have to trade for an outfielder. But here's the problem with that. Across the sport right now, there aren't many right-handed hitting outfielders who really move the needle. Maybe the Phillies could trade Alec Boehm to the Angels for Taylor Ward, who strikes out more than Boehm but hits for a lot more power. 36 homers this year, 25 last year. Both players have 1 year left before free agency. Both are due to make about $10 or $12 million in salary arbitration. Maybe there's another trade out there. Either way, the feeling around the sport is the Phillies will have someone different in right field next season, even as they're paying most of Castellanos' salary wherever he winds up. Thanks again, Megan, for the great question, and please keep them coming all off season long. I'm trying to take as many as we can throughout the off season until we get to spring training. All right, we'll leave it there this week and tell you that all past episodes of Phillies Extra are available by going to inquirer.com and clicking on the Inquirer Live tab, or on the Inquirer's YouTube and Facebook pages. That's always an easy way to catch up on any shows that you may have missed. You can also listen to this episode and many others on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And while you're there, please give us a follow and rate and review us. Thanks again to my guest, Dusty Wathan, of course, and to David Murphy for stopping by as well. And thanks to Mariam Akraz, our producer this week, for helping us put all of this together. Most of all, thank you so much out there for listening, watching, and of course for reading the Philadelphia Inquirer